The dense forest loomed ahead, its gnarled branches reaching like claws into the darkening sky. John pedaled faster, his tires crunching over fallen leaves and twigs as the sun sank below the tree line. He had to find Mary before nightfall. They had planned a relaxing bike ride through the scenic trails near their home before cooking dinner together. But when John returned to an empty house as the hours passed, worry set in. He tried calling Mary's phone repeatedly, but it went straight to voicemail. Her last text, sent shortly before she headed out, echoed in John's mind. "See you soon, my love. Can't wait to spend the evening with you. I love you." It wasn't like Mary to disappear without contacting him. She knew these woods held dangers, especially after nightfall. Dark thoughts crept in as John searched the trails, his calls growing more frantic. What if she had an accident, or worse, met with foul play from someone lurking in the shadows of the forest? This area had a reputation for shady characters taking advantage of its isolation. The sun dipped below the tree line, bathing the woods in an eerie blue twilight. John fumbled to turn on his phone flashlight, his hands shaking. That's when he spotted it, a glint of metal, partially hidden under fallen leaves. He skidded to a stop and rushed over. Pushing aside the debris, John's heart sank. It was Mary's bike, lying on its side with the front wheel bent at an unnatural angle. A few feet away, her phone lay cracked open, the screen shattered beyond repair. "Mary!" John screamed into the gathering dusk, his voice echoing through the dense trees. Only silence answered his desperate cries. With trembling hands, he dialed 911. "Please, you have to send help. My girlfriend is missing in the woods." He begged the operator between choked sobs. As night fell, searchlights from police vehicles broke through the inky darkness. But it was too late to locate any tracks. John could only watch from the edge of the forest, hugging himself against the chill that had nothing to do with the dropping temperature. Where was Mary? Had some predator already dragged her deeper into these woods, never to be seen again? The questions swirled in John's mind, each more horrible than the last. All because of one careless selfie and an innocent bike ride gone wrong in the looming shadows of the forest. The morning sun did little to lift John's spirits 2 weeks later. He sat slumped on the front porch, staring blankly into the woods as police vehicles came and went. Each day of fruitless searching added to the hollow ache in his chest. Inside, officers drank coffee and discussed the case in hushed tones. They tried keeping details from John, but he knew the odds were against Mary still being alive. Without a ransom note or signs of struggle found near her bike, hope was fading. A cruiser pulled up, and John perked up, praying they had news. But the somber faces exiting the vehicle crushed any flicker of hope. "We found a body deep in the forest," the lead detective said gently. "It matches Mary's description. We need you to come identify." The ride to the morgue passed in a blur. John moved in a daze, numbly following orders on autopilot. Inside the cold room, he steeled himself before the sheet was pulled back to reveal Mary's pale, lifeless face. His knees buckled at the sight. She was so still and colorless, a stark contrast to her usual radiant smile. Bruises marred her delicate skin. John choked back a sob, gently cupping her cheek one last time. "My love, I'm so sorry. I couldn't save you." The autopsy findings provided little comfort. Blunt force trauma indicated a struggle, and the gunshot wound to her chest was the cause of death. Time of death, placed at the evening she went missing. John's grief turned to rage. Someone had brutally murdered his Mary in those cursed woods. That night, He sat alone in their home, clutching one of Mary's worn flannel shirts to his face and sobbing. The house felt empty and cold without her cheerful presence. On the table, her smiling selfie from that fateful bike ride taunted him. Who could do such a thing? And why had they dumped her body so deep in the forest, as if trying to hide their crime? John replayed the details obsessively, searching for any clue the police may have missed. He couldn't let Mary's killer roam free while he wallowed in grief. In the morning, John marched to the police station with newfound determination burning in his eyes. "I'm not waiting around anymore," he told the detectives. "I'm going to find out what really happened to Mary with or without your help." The lead detective sighed. "Son, it's not a good idea to go snooping in that forest alone. Let us handle the investigation." But John was beyond reason in his quest for answers. Armed with Mary's last known whereabouts, he headed into the ominous woods, following the route of her final bike ride. The forest seemed to close in around him, its gnarled branches reaching like a vengeful grip. But John pushed on, driven to uncover the dark secrets lurking within its shadowy depths. Justice would be served for his beloved Mary. He'd make sure of it. The forest swallowed John as he pedaled deeper along Mary's trail. Overhead, storm clouds gathered, blocking the sun's weak rays. An eerie silence pressed in from all sides, except the crunch of leaves under his tires. He stopped where they found her shattered phone, scanning the area. That's when he spotted the faint indentation of tire tracks veering off the main path. His heart raced as he followed them toward a dilapidated structure in the distance. The abandoned two-story cabin looked like it may collapse at any moment. Boards covered the windows, and the porch sagged under a layer of fallen leaves. An old truck sat rusting beside it. As John crept closer, movement inside caught his eye. He ducked behind an oak, watching carefully. After a few moments, the front door creaked open, and a haggard man emerged carrying an axe. Scraggly brown hair hung in his sunken eyes, and his gaunt frame was wrapped in worn flannel. The man, Marcus, if the truck's registration was to be believed, glared into the woods as if daring anyone to cross his path. A cold shiver ran down John's spine, seeing the man's predatory gaze. He waited until Marcus disappeared around back before hurrying over to search for clues. The cabin was sparsely furnished with dust-coated items. A generator powered ancient appliances and string lights. In the corner, a laptop sat open on a rickety table, its glow illuminating a grimy window. John's blood ran cold, seeing photos of Mary pulled up. Recent shots of her biking and smiling, as if being watched. He scrolled back and froze. Dozens more photos documented her daily activities, even intimate moments with John. A floorboard creaked outside. John ducked behind the couch as heavy footsteps approached. He peered out in horror to see Marcus dragging Mary's limp form through the door, blood staining her shirt. The man dumped her body like trash before turning to the laptop with a chilling grin. John stifled a gasp, bile rising in his throat. His worst fears were confirmed. Mary had been Marcus's prisoner before meeting her gruesome end. Vengeance coursed through John's veins, hot and poisonous. He had to get out, plan his next move carefully. But first, he snapped photos of the damning evidence on Marcus's computer as insurance. Then he slipped away into the gathering storm, mind racing to bring a monster to justice. The storm raged as John hurried home, soaked to the bone. He reviewed the chilling photos repeatedly, unable to process the horror of Mary's final moments. Marcus had watched her, stalked her like prey in those woods, and when she ventured too close to his lair, John shuddered, rage and grief battling within. This monster couldn't be allowed to roam free while Mary lay in the cold ground. Come nightfall, John loaded his hunting rifle and returned to the forest under cover of darkness. Lightning flashed as he crept toward the cabin, rain pounding relentlessly. Inside, a generator hummed, and the laptop glow cast an eerie glow through grimy windows. John peered in to see Marcus hunched over the computer, scrolling through more photos of Mary. His hands shook with fury, finger itching on the trigger. But he had to play this carefully. Willing force was his only advantage. Taking a steadying breath, John kicked in the rotting door with a crash of splintering wood. Marcus whirled with a snarl, lunging for the rifle propped beside him. But John was faster, leveling his weapon with deadly precision. "Get away from that computer, you sick fuck," he roared over the howling storm. Marcus froze, sizing up this new threat with cold calculation. Recognition flickered in his dead eyes. "I know who you are," the man rasped. "You're the boyfriend. Come to avenge your little slut, have you?" White-hot rage consumed John at those vile words. 2 shots rang out as one, the cabin echoing with thunderous cracks. Marcus staggered back, clutching his bleeding shoulder. But John's aim held true, the second bullet catching him square in the chest. The man crashed to the floor, gurgling crimson foam from his lips. John stood over him, watching the light drain from those soulless eyes until nothing but a shell remained. At long last, Mary could rest. Her tormentor would plague no one ever again. John's vengeance was complete. Or was it? As the storm raged on, an unsettling thought took hold in the dark recesses of his mind. What if Marcus wasn't the only monster lurking in these cursed woods? The morning sun did little to lift John's troubled spirits. He sat alone in the police station, recounting the previous night's events in a daze. The detectives eyed him skeptically, but lacked evidence to charge him. After all, they had long suspected Marcus was dangerous, and John claimed self-defense that the deranged man lunged for the rifle first during a confrontation. Without the cabin or Marcus's computer as evidence, it seemed an open and shut case of justifiable homicide. The lead detective sighed. "Son, I know you are grieving, but taking the law into your own hands isn't the answer. Promise me no more vigilante justice." John nodded numbly, mind elsewhere. Something didn't sit right about Marcus being the sole culprit. An unsettled feeling lingered that another evil still lurked in those woods. He returned to the forest, picking his way through the downpour to the now empty cabin. Inside, damp papers and moldy books were strewn about. A tattered journal caught John's eye, its pages bloated with rainwater. Carefully unfolding the soaked sheets revealed a chilling account, Marcus documenting years spent stalking victims in the forest, torturing them for his sadistic pleasure, before killing them. But the most recent entries unnerved John. It describes capturing and keeping Mary alive for over a week, inflicting unspeakable acts of violence. But then another man arrived, demanding Marcus hand the girl over to him. They fought, and Marcus was forced to shoot the intruder before fleeing into the night. A wave of nausea overcame John. If this was true, then Marcus wasn't the mastermind after all. There was someone even more depraved out there who had their sights set on Mary long before that fateful bike ride. Racing back to town, John burst into the police station, breathless. "Detectives, you have to reopen the case. Marcus wasn't alone. There's another killer still out there, but without solid evidence, they remained unconvinced. That night, John returned to the forest, armed, determined to find the answers haunting him. Deep in the woods, a distant scream pierced the gloom. He sprinted toward the sound, emerging in a small clearing, bathed in pale moonlight. There, a hulking figure in a dark hoodie loomed over a bound, struggling young woman. At John's gasp, the man whirled, a familiar predatory gleam in his eyes. No, can't be, John thought numbly, but it was too late. The true monster had been lurking right under their noses all along.